Many of you may remember there was a time when every Catholic home had signs you could feel before you ever saw a cross or a Bible. You'd walk in, and something in the air told you, this family prays here. Stay with me, because today we're going to examine those signs. I am Father Felix, and thank you for joining. We'll talk about the sick call kit tucked in a drawer, waiting for a priest who might come in the night. We'll talk about a small wax medallion almost nobody remembers anymore, or that statue of Mary in the front yard. And we'll start right at the front door with a little dish of water that most homes don't have. 10 things in one countdown. I invite you to think about how many your family still keeps. Let's start at number 10. Number 10, the holy water font by the front door. It was small, usually just a shallow dish mounted on the wall, kept filled so a hand could dip in without thinking twice. You'd bless yourself walking out the door and walking back in, morning and night, leaving and returning. The same small sign traced over you both times, like a pair of bookends holding the day together. Here's the quiet truth about why it disappeared. It wasn't torn off the wall in some big decision. Fewer homes even had that font blessed in the first place. Families moved more often than they used to, and the habit just faded gradually until one generation simply forgot to fill it. The object usually outlasted the gesture. You may still find these fonts in older houses, dry and empty, doing nothing. Number 9, the family Bible, the big one, with blank pages sewn right into the middle for births, marriages, and deaths. Think of it this way. For a lot of families, that Bible was the only written record they kept of themselves. Long before birth certificates and church registries caught up to everyday life, someone would write a name in careful handwriting the week a baby arrived. And that same book, open to scripture on Sunday, held the whole family's history by Tuesday. It was ledger and altar at once, which is a strange thing for one book to be. And this one wasn't reserved for just Catholics either. And that's exactly what slipped away quietly. Birth certificates took over the official record, then ancestry websites came along, and digital photos, and nobody needed a book on the shelf to hold the family's memory anymore. The function didn't get replaced by something better, really. It just got scattered across a dozen different places instead of living in one. Number 8, a crucifix in every bedroom, not just one, hanging in the living room where everyone would see it. It was the last thing you saw before you closed your eyes, and the first thing you saw when you opened them. Some families made a small habit of it, a glance, a whispered word, nothing formal, just a moment of contact before sleep took over. And that's where the pattern starts to shift a little. Bedrooms became more neutral over time, more about decor than devotion, and faith symbols got pushed out to the common areas, the living room, maybe the hallway, which means the most private room in the house, the one where you're most alone with your own thoughts, is often the room that lost its cross first. These first 3 all lived at the threshold of the home, the door, the shelf, the bedroom wall. What comes next lived somewhere deeper, closer to the family's actual survival and who they understood themselves to be. Number 7 on the list is the sick call kit, and it usually lived in a drawer or a small case somewhere out of the way, but always ready, holding a candle, a crucifix, a bit of cloth, sometimes a small dish, all of it waiting for a knock at the door that might come at 2 a.m. when someone in the house was dying or too sick to make it to church. The priest didn't wait for them to come to him. He came to the bedside, and the family already had everything laid out because they'd kept it that way for years, maybe decades, without ever needing to think twice about where it was. There's a kind of readiness in that worth sitting with for a second. A family kept that kit stocked the same way you'd keep a fire extinguisher on the wall, hoping every single day that it stayed exactly where it was and never got used. And when it finally did get used, it meant something enormous was happening in that house, something the whole family would remember for the rest of their lives. And so this practice slowly faded. Hospitals took over the last chapter of a person's life. Home visits from a priest got rarer as parishes grew and priests got fewer. And somewhere in there, the kit lost its reason to exist. Nobody threw it away in protest. It just didn't have anywhere left to sit. Number 6 was a small statue chosen for what the family did for a living or where they'd come from. A carpenter might keep St. Joseph on a shelf, tools in hand, because that's who you turn to when your livelihood depended on your hands working right. And a family that crossed an ocean might carry a saint from the old country packed in with the dishes and photographs, because leaving a village behind didn't mean leaving everything behind. These weren't generic statues you'd pick up because they looked nice on a shelf. They were personal, tied to a grandfather's trade or a great-grandmother's town. The kind of object that answered the question, where do we come from, without anyone having to ask it out loud. Think of that statue as a small anchor, holding the old world steady while the family drifted further into the new one, and that's precisely why it faded. Sons stopped following their fathers into the same trade. Grandchildren grew up further and further from the village nobody in the family had seen in 2 generations. And the statue stayed on the shelf a while after the connection went thin. until at some point it didn't. And number 5 brings us to the Sacred Heart, a framed image of Christ, usually with a small red lamp kept burning nearby. This was often the first thing your eye landed on walking into the main room, not hidden in a corner or tucked behind other decor, but placed where the whole house had to pass it every day. That lamp stayed lit, low and steady, day and night, marking the room as a place where something mattered beyond the furniture and the framed photographs. Home decor drifted toward minimalism over the years, and an open flame burning indoors unattended stopped fitting into anybody's idea of a safe or tidy living room. So the image moved sometimes to a hallway where fewer people would notice, sometimes disappearing from the house entirely, replaced by nothing in particular except emptiness. So far, every item on this list has lived inside the house, behind a door, on a shelf, in a drawer. But the next one didn't wait for you to come inside at all. Number 4 is that statue of Mary standing in the front yard, recognized by Catholics and non-Catholics alike. Sometimes it was a small grotto built with real care out of stone or brick, and sometimes, let's be honest with each other here, it was half a bathtub buried upright in the ground with a statue set inside like a little shell around her. That bathtub shrine wasn't a shortcut or a mistake. It turned into its own bit of Catholic folk tradition, and at some point, families stopped trying to explain it and just leaned into it instead. Either way, grotto or bathtub, she stood where the street could see her before anyone ever reached the porch, and that's worth pausing on. This wasn't faith tucked away inside where only guests who made it past the door would notice. It sat right out front, visible to every neighbor who walked by. Quiet way of saying this house belongs to someone, and that someone is watching over it. Neighborhoods changed the way they looked at that kind of thing. Homeowner associations came in with rules about what could sit in the front yard, and under all of that, something else shifted too. General pull toward keeping faith private, something you practiced indoors, rather than something the whole street could see from the sidewalk. Number 3 is the rosary. Many times it was hanging on the bedpost, not folded into a drawer with the good jewelry or sitting in a box somewhere safe and out of reach, but hanging right there, exactly where a hand could find it in the dark without needing to turn on a light. There for the night sleep wouldn't come easy, for waiting rooms, for whatever ordinary worry happened to be sitting on someone's chest that week. Rosaries didn't disappear from Catholic homes. People still own them, still get them as gifts for First Communions and confirmations. But what changed is where they live. A rosary today is far more likely to sit in a drawer or a jewelry box or a glove compartment than to hang somewhere in reach for the exact moment a hand goes looking for it in the dark. Number 2 is the Agnus Dei Medallion. Small wax medals, blessed, once kept somewhere in the home as a quiet form of protection over the household. Ask most people today what an Agnus Dei even looks like, and you'll get a blank stare back. It's not that anyone rejected the custom or decided it was outdated. Nobody made that choice. It just stopped getting passed down, one generation not quite handing it to the next, until the whole practice slipped out of memory without a single argument against it. Perhaps I'll do a video discussing this one further. And number 1 I find especially interesting, the prayer corner or the home altar, a small table maybe, a cloth laid over it, a candle, a Bible, a few images set up on purpose, not for decoration, but because that spot in the house existed for one reason and one reason only. Everything else on this list pointed toward that corner in some way. The font by the door, the crucifix on the wall, the lamp burning by the Sacred Heart. This was where all of it gathered into one place. Homes got busier, rooms got repurposed for whatever the family needed that year, a home office, a playroom, storage, and that one corner, the one that used to exist for a single purpose, lost its ground to something more practical. 10 items, 10 small pieces of a house that used to announce itself before you ever said a word. Step back from the list for a moment, because what ties all 10 together says something bigger than any one of them does on its own. I've always found it striking that none of these 10 things were decorations. They didn't wait for a holiday or a visit from the priest to be noticed, and they didn't need some occasion to make faith feel worth pulling out. Instead, they sat right inside the ordinary traffic of a house, the door you walked through twice a day, the bed you slept in every night, the yard your neighbor's eyes passed over on the way to their own front door. Faith didn't wait for church because it lived in the walking around, and there's something beautiful in that. So here's the invitation, no guilt attached, just an open door. You don't need to rebuild all 10, and nobody's asking you to hang a lamp by a Sacred Heart image this week. Maybe it's just one object, one small habit brought back into a room where you'll actually cross paths with it. Think of it this way. Pick one thing off this list, maybe a font by the door or a rosary within reach of the bed. Put it somewhere your hand will find it without looking, and let it do the quiet work it always did. We could all use a little reminder to help bring much needed peace into our lives. The traditional Catholic home was never full of decoration. It was full of reminders, and a reminder only works if you can see it. So I'd love to hear from you. Which of these 10 does your family still keep? Drop it in the comments. And next week, we're stepping inside the church itself to find the 10 things that quietly disappeared from there too. I am Father Felix, and thank you for listening. Peace be with you, and God bless.